Welcome back, everyone, to the Deep Dive. Today, we're setting off on a journey.
An adventure, really.
Yeah, an adventure to ancient Kashmir. And we've got our trusty guide, this memoir on maps illustrating the ancient geography of Kashmir.
It's a fascinating document, full of details.
So we're going to dive deep, use those maps, use all the chronicles, and really get a feel for this region back then. What do you say? Ready to go back in time?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Okay, so first things first. What makes ancient Kashmir, geographically, what makes it so special?
Well, it's not just any valley, right? I mean, you've got these mountain ranges, the Himalayas,
Yeah.
the Pir Panjal Range. These are massive, and they played a huge role, not just in, the landscape, but in the civilization itself.
So it's more than just like a pretty backdrop.
Oh, way more. We're talking natural defenses, isolation. Think about it, even Alexander the Great.
Oh, yeah.
He came close, but he never actually entered the Kashmir Valley.
It's like a hidden world almost.
Exactly, and that's a big part of what makes it so unique.
Okay, so we've got this hidden world protected by mountains, but how do we even know about it? What are our sources here?
Right, good question. We do have some glimpses from, texts from outside Kashmir.
Like travelers, maybe?
Yeah, but I'd say they're kind of limited, like postcards. You get a snapshot, but not the full picture.
Ah, okay, so where's the good stuff, the inside scoop?
The real gems are the Kashmiri sources themselves. And the star of the show,
Drum roll.
Kahana's Rajatrangina.
Okay, say that again?
The Rajatrangina.
Got it. Yeah, it's this incredible chronicle, super detailed, talks about locations, distances, even the climate back then.
So like a GTS for ancient Kashmir?
Kind of, but with way more personality, for sure. It's a fascinating read.
Okay, that sounds amazing. Anything else we should know about? Any other sources we're drawing from? Oh yeah, we've got the Nelamattaporta. It's a mix of history and mythology, and the Harakarta Sintamang, which is great for its descriptions. It's very evocative. And then, of course, we have all these later chronicles. They all add their own little pieces to the puzzle.
So we're really piecing together a whole picture here. That's fascinating. Okay, so I've got to ask this. How did the valley itself how did it come to be? Do these sources, did they say anything about the origins of Kashmir?
Oh yeah, the Nilamattapura. It's got this incredible story.
A story. Okay, lay it on me.
Picture this, right? The Kashmir Valley, completely submerged underwater, a vast lake.
Wow.
And in that lake lives this demon, Jalubava.
Okay, that doesn't sound good.
No, he's causing all sorts of chaos. So Vishnu, the protector god, he decides he's got to do something.
Enter the hero.
Exactly. So Vishnu, he calls on his brother, Balabhadra. Now, Balabhadra, he's got this mighty plowshare, and together they literally drain the lake.
Whoa, that's a pretty dramatic origin story.
It is, but what's really interesting is there are observations about changes in the valley's drainage systems historically.
So maybe there's a grain of truth in there, like a reflection of real changes.
It's possible. I mean, that's part of what makes these myths so fascinating, the way they blend with actual events.
Right. Okay, so we've got this dramatic creation story, this valley surrounded by mountains, and we've got these chronicles written by the Kashmiris themselves.
It's an incredible set of sources.
It is. This is going to be a good one. Okay, so let's talk about those mountains then. What's their story?
Well, they weren't just breathtaking scenery.
No.
No, they were crucial for defense. The natural guardians of the valley.
Of a fortress.
Exactly. Kashmir earned this reputation for being, unconquerable, and a lot of that is because of those mountains.
Okay, they sound pretty intimidating. But I imagine there were some ways through, right? Some passes, some routes.
Right. And those passes, they were key. Whoever controlled them controlled access to the valley. One of the most important was the Tosamaidan Pass.
Tosamaidan Pass, got it.
Yeah. Through the Pir Panjal Range, it connected Kashmir with the Punjab, so super important for trade. Communication.
A lifeline, basically.
Yeah, and they had to protect it, so they set up these watch stations, drangas.
Drangas. So these were like guard posts.
Yeah, perched up high, keeping an eye on things, making sure no one snuck in who shouldn't be there.
Makes sense. And were there any specific groups they were worried about?
Well, to the north, you had the Dards.
Dards, okay.
They were known for being fierce warriors, a lot of clashes with the Kashmiris. Keeping those northern borders safe, it was a challenge.
It sounds intense up there. And speaking of essential elements, we can't forget about the Vitasta River, right?
Oh, absolutely. The Vitasta, or the Jhelum River, as we know it today, it was vital, the only outlet for the valley. Transportation, communication, imagine, boats laden with goods going up and down that river.
Yeah. So it was really the heart of it all.
It was. But of course, with rivers, you also have the risk of floods.
Oh, right. And with those mountains, I bet that wasn't easy to
It
manage.
was a constant challenge, but they were ingenious. The chronicles talk about embankments, floodgates, even intricate canal systems, and we were masters of water management.
Wow, that's impressive. So they really had to work with the river?
They did, and it wasn't just, practical.
No.
They believed the Vitasta, it originated from this sacred spring at the foot of Mount Haramuk. Imagine this crystal clear water cascading down from this mythical mountain.
That's a beautiful image.
It is. And the name Vitasti itself, in Sanskrit, it means the ladder.
The ladder.
Yeah, like a path to the divine. It's this connection between the earthly and the heavenly.
So it was more than just a river. It was a symbol.
Exactly. They saw this spiritual significance in everything, and that's really reflected in how they built their cities, their urban centers as well.
Okay, I'm ready to explore those cities. Tell me about Narapur. I've heard it was this bustling hub. What made it so special?
Oh, Narapura. The Rajtarangana describes it as this flourishing city, trade, culture, you name it, merchants from all over coming and going. The streets were alive.
Sounds like a glimpse into a lost world.
It does, but while Narapura, it's more of this legendary city, we also have the capitals, the centers of power.
Ah, right. Where the real action was. Okay, which one do we start with?
Well, Pandritan, it was the first of the two main capitals, strategically located, fortified, a real hub of activity. But like many cities, things change, and a new capital emerged, Srinagar.
Shredder, wait a minute. Isn't that still the capital of Kashmir today?
It is, and it's been the heart of the valley for centuries. But why the shift? Why move from Pandritan? Well, security might have been a factor. Srinagar's location almost entirely surrounded by water.
Natural defenses.
Exactly. It made it a tough nut to crack. Plus, space. As the kingdom grew, Pandretan might have just become too small. Srinagar, on the banks of the Vipasta, it had room to grow.
Makes sense. So thinking long term.
Right. And Srinagar was designed with both, with practicality and beauty in mind. Grand structures, bustling markets, a network of bridges and waterways. It was impressive.
So this wasn't just a functional city. It was meant to make a statement.
Absolutely. It was a reflection of their ambition, their artistry. But, other towns like Partihasapura, which King Lalitaditya founded, they eventually declined. Even the grandest cities are not immune to the tides of change.
It makes you think about the forces at play, the decisions, the events that shape the fate of a city.
It does, but Srinagar, it endured. And it's a story that's still unfolding even today.
That's incredible. Okay, I'm curious now. What was life like for everyday people in these ancient Kashmiri cities? What were their lives like?
Well, we've got some fascinating insights from a traveler who came all the way from China, a Buddhist monk named Hian Zhang.
Heinzum. Okay. And he visited Kashmir?
He did in the 7th century, and his accounts, they're like a window into the past. He was impressed by the people. He described them as handsome, light-hearted, really fond of learning.
So he had a good time there.
He did. He loved their intelligence, their love of music, even their clothes, he mentioned those. Elegant, colorful, it's a vibrant picture he paints.
That's awesome. So they sound like a pretty sophisticated bunch, but I imagine they had to be practical too,
Right.
living in this mountainous region.
Oh, absolutely. The Kashmir Valley, it was fertile, perfect for agriculture. They were skilled farmers, cultivating rice, saffron, all sorts of fruits and vegetables.
So they were making the most of that fertile land.
They were. And get this, they even had sophisticated irrigation systems. We're talking water management experts here.
Wow. So they weren't just passively farming, they were actively shaping their environment.
Exactly. But farming wasn't the only thing. They had a thriving artisan culture too, renowned for their textiles, especially those incredibly soft shawls.
Oh, those Kashmiri shawls are legendary.
They are, made from the wool of Kashmiri goats. The craftsmanship was incredible. And they were skilled metal workers too. They had iron mines in the mountains.
Okay, so resourceful and adaptable. They were making the most of what they had.
Precisely. And that mix of agriculture, craftsmanship, trade, it created a thriving economy. But of course, there were challenges.
Oh, yeah, I bet. What were some of the things they had to deal with?
Well, floods, obviously. And the chronicles, they mention periods of famine, especially after, devastating floods that would wipe out crops.
That's a good point. Even in a land of plenty, things can go wrong.
They can, but the ancient Kashmiris, they were resilient. They adapted. They found ways to thrive. And I think a big part of that was their beliefs, their spiritual practices.
Okay, yeah, let's talk about that. We talked about the Tirthas earlier, those sacred sites. What can they tell us about their beliefs?
Well, the sheer number of them, right? That tells us a lot. They had this deep reverence for the land, and they saw this connection to the sacred everywhere.
Like their spirituality was woven into the landscape itself.
Exactly. You find Hindu sites, Buddhist monasteries. Later, you even have Muslim ziyarats. It's this beautiful mix of traditions. And often, these tirthas, they're associated with local legends, myths.
So it's not just about, going to a place to worship. It's about connecting with the stories, with the history of that place.
Exactly. And that reverence, it shows up in everything, their cultural practices, how they celebrated life.
Okay, now I'm really curious. Tell me more about their culture. What were some of their key practices?
Well, imagine these vibrant festivals, marking the seasons, the harvests, music, dance. They were huge parts of their lives. They were also incredible storytellers, passing down traditions and tales from generation to generation.
Sounds like they really knew how to celebrate life.
They did, and whether they were weaving intricate textiles, building these amazing structures, or creating music, there was this artistry, this soulfulness to everything they did.
A real appreciation for beauty.
They had that, and it's an incredible legacy to explore.
It is. This deep dive is shaping up to be pretty amazing. We've got the mountains, the river, the cities, the people, their beliefs. What else is in store?
Well, there's one thing that makes ancient Kashmir particularly unique. Unlike other parts of India, it doesn't have a lot of epigraphical records.
Hold on, remind me what epigraphical means again. Is it like hieroglyphics but in ancient Kashmir?
You're on the right track. It's basically inscriptions on durable materials, stone, copper, like official decrees, temple records, even dedications. They're like direct messages from the past.
Oh, right, right. So we don't have many of those in Kashmir.
Not really. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces, so we have to rely even more on those chronicles and texts.
Makes them even more precious then.
Absolutely. Every detail matter. It's a good reminder to pay attention and to really appreciate what we do have.
I like that. Pay attention. Okay, so we need to be extra careful with these sources. Speaking of details, what about the climate of ancient Kashmir? What was the weather like?
Well, we've got this fascinating account from al-Biruni. He wrote about Kashmir in the 11th century. And he observed something really interesting. Kashmir, it's got its own microclimate.
A microclimate? Okay.
Yeah, it's shielded by the mountains, so it doesn't get those heavy monsoon rains like other parts of India.
So the mountains, again, they're playing a role.
Always. Al-Biruni, he describes Kashmir as having a temperate climate. Snow in the winter, some rain in the spring. He even says on the clouds coming from the south, they'd hit the mountains, release their moisture before even reaching the valley.
Wow, so it's like the mountains were controlling the weather.
They were, and that seems to have been the case throughout history. Now, Kahana does mention some heavy snowfall sometimes, and he even suggests that at one point the snow caused problems for Buddhists.
Oh, wow.
But overall, it seems like it was pretty temperate, fairly predictable.
A delicate balance then. The geography, the climate, it all worked together.
It did, and speaking of forces at play, there are also mentions of other natural events that affected them.
Oh, okay, like what?
Earthquakes, there are accounts of seismic activity.
Earthquakes. In a region surrounded by mountains.
It must have been terrifying. And there are even some intriguing hints about volcanic activity.
Volcanoes. Wow, this place sounds wild.
It was a land of incredible beauty and power, and yet, amidst all that, they built this vibrant culture. They were resilient.
That's what keeps coming up, that resilience. It's really remarkable.
It is, and it's part of what makes exploring their history so captivating. They faced so much, from neighboring groups to the forces of nature, and yet they thrived. They adapted, they innovated, they created this unique legacy, and we're still uncovering it today.
This is amazing. I feel like we've just started, and I've already learned so much.
We've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to discover in those chronicles, on those ancient maps.
I can't wait. This is like we're on a quest to bring ancient Kashmir back to life.
We are, and the more we learn, the more we appreciate their resilience, their ingenuity, their connection to the land. And it's a legacy that gets even richer when we start to look at the political landscape of ancient Kashmir. I mean, it wasn't just this isolated valley, it was a kingdom.
Right, right. With its own power dynamics, its own relationships with other regions. Okay, so let's talk politics then. What about the borders of this kingdom? Were they always clear-cut, or did they change over time?
Well, those mountains, they weren't just shaping the landscape, they were shaping the frontiers of the kingdom as well.
Natural boundaries.
Exactly, but those boundaries, they weren't always fixed. They could expand, contract, depending on what was happening.
Okay, so the mountains are more than just mountains. They're like political markers, too. And controlling those passes, that must have been crucial.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. For security, for projecting power. And to really understand all of that, we've got to look at their neighbors. To the south, for example, you had the Punjab region.
The Punjab, okay.
Fertile plains, bustling cities. It was a major hub. And the Tosamayan Pass, that was the main link between Kashmir and the Punjab.
So this pass, it was more than just a way through the mountains. It was like a bridge between two worlds.
A bridge for trade, for communication, yeah. A vital connection. What about other directions? To the west, you had the region of Ganbara.
Gandhara, now that name rings a bell. Wasn't that part of Alexander the Great's route?
It was a real crossroads of empires and cultures. And Kashmir, it was connected to all of that.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking southwest. What about north and east? Who were their neighbors there?
To the north, you had the Dards.
The Dards, right? We talked about them a bit.
Yeah, those fierce mountain warriors. They were a constant challenge for the Kashmiri rulers. Imagine trying to keep those northern borders secure. It wasn't easy.
I bet. And to the east.
To the east, you had the Bhutas, people of Tibetan descent. They lived in the high-altitude regions, what we know as Ladakh today, a very different environment compared to the Kashmir Valley.
So we're talking about a real mix of cultures here surrounding ancient Kashmir, each one bringing its own dynamic to the mix. Did the size of the kingdom, did it stay the same throughout its history, or did it fluctuate?
Oh, it definitely fluctuated. I mean, those frontiers, they were constantly in flux. Expanding, contracting, it all depended on the strength of their rulers, their relationships with those neighbors, the balance of power.
Always shifting, always changing. Sounds like ancient Kashmir was anything but static. It was dynamic. Okay, so how do they manage all of this complexity? What was their internal administration like?
Well, the sources, particularly the Rajataroniya, they give us some clues about how they govern themselves.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me about their system.
One of the fundamental divisions was between what they called the inner and outer realms.
Inner and outer realms. Okay, so kind of like a core and a periphery.
Exactly, the heartland of the kingdom and then the surrounding territories, which acted as a buffer zone.
Makes sense. Okay, so break it down for me. What was the inner realm all about?
The inner realm, or Kramarija, that was the Kashmir Valley itself, the fertile heartland, where agriculture thrived, where the cities were located, where most of the people lived.
Makes sense. The heart of it all. And the outer realm.
That was Mandaraja, the mountainous territory surrounding the valley. Not as fertile, but strategically vital. Defense, control of those trade routes.
Right. So like a protective layer around the heartland. Did those realms stay the same over time, or did their boundaries also change?
Oh, they changed too, just like the external frontiers. Sometimes the outer realm would expand, sometimes it would contract. It was all about adapting to the circumstances, maintaining that balance.
Always about balance. I like that. Okay, so realms, check. Any other subdivisions we should know about?
Within the realms, you had these administrative units called parganas. Think of them like districts or counties, each one with its own local administration, keeping things running smoothly, collecting taxes, all that.
Okay, so we're talking about a hierarchical system here. Kingdom, realms, parganas. It sounds like a pretty well-organized setup.
It was, but even within that structure, there was flexibility. The number and boundaries of those parganas, they could change over time too, adjusting to the needs of the kingdom.
Adaptable. I like it. They were thinking ahead. Okay, so we've got this administrative framework. But within that framework, we've also got those vibrant urban centers, the cities.
Exactly, the hubs of life, the economic engines, the political centers, the places where culture flourished. Cities were essential to the kingdom's prosperity.
And we talked about a few of those already, Narapura, Pandreth, Srinagra. Any other important towns that we should know about?
Well, there was Parihasapura, founded by King Lalitaditya. He had big plans for that city. He envisioned it as a grand new capital.
A rival for Srinagra, maybe.
Possibly, but it didn't quite work out that way. Parihasapura eventually declined. And there are a few theories about why.
Okay, I'm curious. What happened?
Well, it's likely that after Lalitaditya's reign, subsequent rulers just shifted their focus elsewhere. Resources, attention, they all went to other cities. And it's also possible that changes in the course of the Vitasta River played a role.
Ah, right. The river. Always a factor.
Exactly. If Parihasapura lost its easy access to the river, that would have been a major blow.
Makes sense. Location, resources, politics, it all comes into play. But then you got Srinagra. Seems like they had all the right ingredients.
It did, and it's a story that's lasted for centuries. I mean, it's still the capital today. But what was it like back then? How was it laid out?
Yeah, I'm picturing it in my mind. Paint me a picture. What would we see if we were walking through ancient Srinagra?
The Rajatarangi tells us it was a bustling city, strategically situated with impressive structures. Imagine this. The city built on both banks of the Vitasta.
Slid by the river.
Right, and those two halves connected by bridges. Busy with boats, ferrying people and goods back and forth. The chronicler even mentions a great bridge, possibly a floating bridge made of boats.
Wow, a floating bridge. That's ingenious.
It is, and beyond the city walls, you had all sorts of notable places. Gopadri Hill, for instance.
Gopatri Hill.
Yeah, rising above the city, crowned by the Jestasvara shrine. Amazing views, a place of pilgrimage, a spiritual landmark.
Okay, so not just a city, it was a whole landscape, a whole environment.
It was, and they had gardens too, beautiful gardens, some of them created much later by the Mughal emperors who were totally captivated by Kashmir's beauty. But those gardens, they added to the city's allure, places of peace, of natural beauty, right in the middle of this bustling urban center.
That's a nice touch, a little bit of serenity amidst the chaos.
Exactly. And from a strategic perspective, Srinagar's location, surrounded by water, it made it really hard to attack. It withstood sieges, It was a tough city to conquer.
They knew what they were doing when they chose that spot.
They did. They were smart, they were creative, and they had a real sense of aesthetic. They wanted their city to be both beautiful and strong.
That balance again. We seem to have found it everywhere. Okay, so we've got the city, we've got the landscape. Now, I want to know more about the people themselves, the people who lived in these cities, who walked these streets. What were their lives like? What did they believe? What were their customs?
Well, the chronicles, they're full of details about everyday life. And those details, combined with the observations of travelers like Hyen Song, they paint a really fascinating picture.
I'm ready for that picture. Fill me in. What were these ancient Kashmiris like?
Well, we've already heard Hyen Song's description, right? Handsome, lighthearted, intelligent, musical. But the chronicles add to that. They give us a sense of their deep connection to the land, their resilience in the face of challenges, their expressiveness.
Expressiveness in what way?
In their culture, in their spirituality, in their everyday lives. Think about it. Vibrant festivals celebrating the season and harvests, music and dance were everywhere. They were also great storytellers. They loved to share their history, their myths, their legends.
It sounds like a very rich culture, a very lively culture. What else? What else stands out?
Well, their lives were so intertwined with nature. They were skilled farmers, adapted to the valley's unique environment. And their craftsmanship, as we talked about, was incredible. Those textiles, the metalwork, and their spirituality. It was woven into everything. Those sacred sites, the myths and legends, they were all connected to the land.
It's like they lived in harmony with their surroundings, drawing strength and inspiration from the natural world.
They did, and that's one of the most remarkable things about their story.
It really is. I mean, to create such a vibrant culture in this mountain valley, it's amazing. As we've been going through these sources, this one thing keeps coming up for me, this theme of balance.
Balance.
Yeah, like between practicality and spirituality, between like adapting to the environment and then also shaping it, to their needs, between like defense and then also this real sense of artistry. It's like finding that balance was key to how they thrived.
That's a really interesting observation. I think, yeah, you've touched on something important there. Like they really saw themselves as part of this bigger system, and finding harmony within that system was crucial. It makes me think about something else that's kind of unique about ancient Kashmir.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued. What are you thinking about?
Well, we've been talking about these chronicles, right? How important they are for understanding this history. But there's another type of historical source that often gives us a lot of information about ancient societies, and it's something that's pretty rare in Kashmir.
Okay, you've piqued my curiosity. What kind of source are we talking about?
We're talking about epigraphical records. So those are inscriptions on things like stone or copper, things that last. They give us these glimpses into the past, direct glimpses.
Right, like ancient decrees or records of transactions or things like that.
Exactly. It's like time capsules, messages from people who lived centuries ago. But the thing is, in Kashmir, we don't have many of those.
Really? That's interesting. So it's like we're missing some pieces of the puzzle.
We are. It's one of the things that makes studying ancient Kashmir so challenging, but also so fascinating. And it really makes those chronicles even more valuable, right?
It does. Makes you wonder why though. Why are there so few of these inscriptions in Kashmir? Any theories about that?
There are a few ideas. Some people think that maybe the materials, like stone, weren't as readily available in certain parts of Kashmir. Others have suggested that, because of all the conflicts and upheaval in the region's history, maybe some of these records were just destroyed or lost.
So it's like a historical mystery within a historical mystery, but even without those inscriptions, we've managed to learn so much. It's pretty amazing. It really speaks to the power of these chronicles and to the people who kept them safe, who preserved them.
It does. And speaking of preserving history, I think we should come back to something we talked about a bit earlier. The climate of ancient Kashmir. Those chronicles, they don't just tell us about kings and queens and battles, they tell us about everyday life. including the weather.
Right, right. We talked about how Kashmir has this unique microclimate, shielded from the monsoons by the mountains. So did those chronicles give any specifics about what the weather was like? Was it harsh? Was it always this paradise that we kind of imagine it to be?
Well, we have this account from al-Biruni. Remember, he traveled to Kashmir in the 11th century. He was a very careful observer, and he describes the climate in some detail.
Okay, let's hear it. What was the weather like according to Al-Biruni?
He says it was temperate, so snowfall in the winter, some rainfall in the spring. But he also mentions that the monsoon clouds, the ones that bring those really heavy rains to other parts of India, they would hit the mountains around Kashmir and release their moisture before they could reach the valley.
So the mountains were blocking the rain, acting like a shield.
Exactly. They were regulating the moisture, creating a more moderate, predictable climate in the valley itself.
The mountains they play a role in everything, don't they? The borders, the politics, the weather, the resources. It's incredible.
They do. It's like they're the defining feature of this whole region. But yeah, back to the weather, it seems like that pattern, the moderate temperatures, the fairly predictable rainfall, it was pretty consistent throughout their history.
So no extreme heat, no super harsh winters.
Well, Kalana does mention periods of very heavy snowfall, and he even says that at one point the snow caused problems for the Buddhists who were living there.
Oh wow. That's interesting.
It is, but overall the picture we get is one of a relatively stable, temperate climate.
Makes you wonder how they dealt with those occasional extremes though. Like did they have a ways of coping with heavy snowfall or with drought?
I'm sure they did, just like they figured out ways to manage the Victosta River to reduce the risk of flooding. They must have had strategies for dealing with other challenges too. It's all about adaptation, about understanding the natural forces at work.
It's fascinating how everything is connected, you know? The mountains, the climate, the agriculture, the cities. It's all part of this one big system.
It is, and that's what makes studying ancient Kashmir so rewarding. Understanding those connections, seeing how it all fits together.
It's been an amazing journey. It really has. I feel like we've traveled through time, explored this lost world, met the people who lived there.
It's been a pleasure, and it's incredible how much we can learn from all these ancient sources, even with their limitations, even with the gaps in the record.
It really makes you wonder what else is out there, what other secrets are waiting to be discovered.
That's the beauty of it, right? There's always more to learn, more to explore.
So before we go, is there a question, a thought, something you want to leave our listeners with, something to ponder as they continue this exploration on their own?
Well, we've talked about how geography and climate and human ingenuity, how they all shaped the story of ancient Kashmir. But I'd like to leave everyone with this question. How did all of those things, how did they come together to create this unique Kashmiri identity?
That's a great question, one that really encourages us to think about the bigger picture, the connections, the complexities. It's been an incredible deep dive, and I really encourage everyone listening to check out those maps, to read those chronicles. There's a whole world waiting to be discovered there. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.